What's happening, Maniacs? Welcome back to the channel. Hope you're all having a fantastic day. Thanks for tuning in once again. As you can see, once again, Holly has joined as a guest. Welcome back to the channel.
Thank you.
So, we did a reaction to Lorna Shore to the Hellfire, and that one went over quite well. And I had a few people say, you need to do the Pain Remains trilogy. So, guess what we're doing today? We're going to do the Pain Remains trilogy. Now, this one is a bit of a contrast to the other, and for full disclosure, I'm very aware of the song. I know it. I've heard it a lot of times. I've seen it live. So, I know what I'm getting into. I don't know if Holly does, but I was surprised that she liked To the Hellfire as much as she did. Again, she's not a big fan of breakdowns, so I didn't know if the deathcore genre would really appeal to her, but you seem to like that one a lot.
I did, yeah.
So I'm definitely curious to see what she thinks of this one, and Holly studies anatomy and stuff, so I just think, based off the subject matter in this and everything, like, I think she'll find it very interesting and probably have a little bit to say about it. Yeah, so not probably quite what you're thinking by me mentioning that, but nonetheless, either way, I think this one will be an interesting reaction. I'm definitely curious. So with that being said, let's get into it. I did pick the version that has lyrics on the screen so she could tell what was being said. There will be no breaks during this either. Love Adam solos in this. Okay.
Huh.
And there we have it. That was the Pain Remains trilogy by Lorna Shore. Now, obviously, this was a bit of a different contrast to the Hellfire.
Yeah.
You know, that one's just kind of more brutal and heavy in breakdowns, where this one kind of centers more around emotions. Definitely has a different feel. We're dealing with loss and grief and anger and everything here. How did this one stack up for you in comparison to that? Which one did you enjoy more?
I think more so this brought back a lot of memories for me, like, you know, like back in the late 80s and early 90s where power ballads were a thing, and especially like telling a story, something like that brought back a lot of memories of that, and I really appreciated that. And also like this had a very like theatrical operatic feel of like there was a play, some sort, or like a story being told, and it was layer after layer, and it was, to me, it was executed relatively well.
It definitely plays like a play. Like it's
Yeah.
like we have three acts here taking place with
Yeah.
you know the three different parts of the song, and that, and obviously you mentioned the ballad thing, which very much so. Like that's what threw a lot of people off with this, was that you know you're coming from something like To the Hellfire and these brutal songs and that, and then you have this where there's like a lot of emotion into it, and then it does. It's got all the synth in that, especially the first part I find has a very ballad feel,
Yeah.
and that kind of threw people for a loop because typically you don't hear that with deathcore.
Yeah.
You're expecting heavy and disgusting, so the fact that they could pull this off as well as they do, I think, is quite the feat.
Yeah, I think I can appreciate it a little bit because of me coming from a theatrical background. Once I kind of grasped that, it kind of brought back where I would listen to Meatloaf and, you know, Bats of Hell, and where that came across, and where a lot of like the harder rock people, when they try to do like more of a ballad, they would have longer songs and those layers as well, and I think they tied into that relatively well, and it just brought back to a lot of feelings over going to plays and shows, or me being in them, just feeling the lyrics and feeling that music like change the tone and everything, and how it just like a very smooth transaction.
Yeah,
So
it's telling a big story here.
Yeah.
Like I said, very theatrical for sure. And
Yeah.
I will admit that when I first saw this, I teared up for the first one. And that again,
Yeah.
you're dealing with loss and grief, and as we get older, again, you know, we come more in touch with our mortality and the people around us. You know, we tend to lose people in our lives, and that's a hard thing to deal with. I know that I think about that more as I get older, which I hate, and that,
Yeah.
but it's a fact of life, right? So it definitely hits harder in my, you know, my years now than it would have when I was like 20 years old. I probably would have laughed at this and not really bought into it the same way that I
Yeah.
do now.
Yeah.
So
I think for me personally, maybe that would be the most, I guess, brutal part of it, is really tapping into those emotions where you do face mortality, or you do have to face at some point something is bigger than what you expect. So like a death of a loved one, that is a heavy, heavy topic that
Absolutely.
we are never prepared for. You could be as prepared as you can be usually, but until it actually happens, until you experience it, you're not really going to know how to handle it, which that for me personally during going into act 2, it took a twist that I was not expecting. Like there's a point where I'm like, okay, I got this. I think I know where this is going. This is pretty cool. And then once it took a twist, I just went, oh, I
think some people expected after part 2 that it was going to kind of become like a redemption thing or something where he was going to be like accept the situation,
right,
and you know, not to say live happily ever after, but that things were going to be okay, and ultimately no, and that, you know, the anger, you know, came in, and basically he's like, if I can't have you, I'm not going to have anything. Like that's how it felt to me. And that
for me, I was expecting kind of doing like that very tragic love tale of going to the afterlife where you see him cutting himself and passing out. I was expecting, okay, he's going to go to the afterworld and trying to get her so they can reunite and be together and just be together in the afterlife. That didn't happen at all, and that's where I was expecting it to go. A very bittersweet but very sad and tragic tale to very almost misanthropic and nihilism of saying, no, the lyrics of like, I'm gonna salt the earth and you're gonna hear the choirs of the devil. And it's just like, oh, I think he sold his soul.
yeah.
And now he's gonna proudly saying like, nope, she's the one. To me, symbolizing of maybe her love gave him life and a reason to live and a reason to.
Absolutely. Clearly she was his everything, and that's
and
that's why he decides to take his life, which of course, if you're dealing with troubles, get help. This is not the way to go about it. And like in a really twisted sort of way, like I took it as in the end, like, okay, this is a tragedy and it's sad, but at the same time now they're back together. And that, so it was kind of in a weird twisted way. I'm not saying this is a good thing and that, but it's like, oh, you know, they are back together again. So he kind of got what he wanted, just not in the form that he wanted.
See, I see where you're going with that, but I disagree a little bit. Whereas it does show that obviously she was sick with some sort of
Illness of some sort.
Yeah, an illness of some sort where it's terminal. So even with her suffering, she still went to a peaceful place, as what the video looked like it was symbolizing. But for me, my personal take was where he was cutting himself, thinking of Mila, going, oh, he's going to try to find her so they could be reunited. Of him selling his soul, I took it as like, oh, maybe he wasn't the greatest person before, that she introduced love, compassion, and stuff like that. And where now she's gone and where he feels slighted. And this is
It's kind of going back to what maybe he was.
yeah, kind of going back to where he was mentally, maybe dealing with some sort of a mental illness, or maybe that's just who he
I mean, I've
is.
heard that in real life of people. They're like,
Yep.
you know, like I've led this terrible lifestyle and
Yep.
was like not in a good place, and then I met that one special person that changed everything around, and then they changed their life, and so
Yep.
yeah, I could definitely see that for sure.
Yeah, so I personally think that he felt slighted, where I think it was in part 2 where the lyrics was like, I've done everything, like, and now, like, where do you go when my eyes are closed? Like, you're not here.
Yeah.
And he feels slighted. So the part of like, I'll salt the earth and I'll ride the lake of fire, that's where just like, that is so nihilistic and misanthropic, especially where that's unfortunately when people feel slighted and they deal with that type of mentality, that's where it goes. And that's
'Cause
where
you're just
like
to hell with everybody, like
they don't care because they can't.
Yeah.
And it just, they can't deal with a lot, and a lot of people can't, but I mean, it's a lot of pain and anger all in one, and it's just, this is what they know. And to me, that's where it shows like, okay, I'm gonna sell my soul, because maybe he feels slighted from her saying, how dare you die? Because if you recall 5 stages of grief, a lot one of it is anger. That
absolutely.
yeah. So if
And clearly part 3 deals with a lot of anger, like
a lot of anger, a lot of vengeful a lot of vengeful feelings, and maybe there is a point where he does feel angry, that he feels like, how dare you leave me?
Yeah.
How dare you get
I
sick?
think anybody would feel that in a sense.
Yeah. Oh,
Again,
yeah.
like you said, you're going to go through all that.
Yeah, this is obviously like to a very extreme,
Yes.
and I think the tale of tragic and love turned a very dark twist, and I was not expecting it to go that way, and I thought it was really well done, and where the melodies of the guitars took you there, which I was really surprised, because it overshadowed the drums in such a tasteful way. I liked it more than the drums, and that
Yeah, that's crazy, because I know that you're all about the drums. You love
it
that
hurt.
metal bass.
It is, and it hurts, but it was so beautiful, and just like
It
the
is very nice
transaction
melodies.
of just like from one okay to all right, we're seeing, and then 3, it was just so dark. It took a tragic love story to a very dark and dangerous twist.
Yeah, like-
I was not expecting it, because we're I'm going to go back to the lyrics of where you know, I'm going to salt the earth, and why I also think it's more so like of a nihilistic kind of way of he's really taking everything from anybody, because also thousands and thousands of years ago, also why salt was such an expensive spice to have was because it was also used as a weapon. So they would salt their enemies' crops so nothing can grow. It kills it, and then you can't grow
I
anything.
suppose, yeah, you're basically destroying life, because if you can't feed
Yeah.
yourself,
Yeah, not only destroying it, but you're preventing it
Yeah.
as well. So it's just, you can't, so you are starving people. So he is really taking everybody, and while also saying, you know, witness your death of the god.
Yeah.
And then
That's very
and
cool.
hear the choirs of the angel or the devils, excuse me. I'm just like, oh, I think he sold his soul, so I think he feels very slighted by everybody, and he just wants to take everything.
clearly she's smarter than me and much more analytical, so I would not have picked up on these things, and I think that's a great take on all of this.
Oh, thank you.
And I do think there is a little bit of, you know, originally I think the song was written with a certain intent.
Yeah.
But then, of course, you know, that might be a hard video to shoot. And that's so they took a different subject matter and placed it with these lyrics to kind of suit as best they could and get that point across. So I do suspect there's a little bit of a disconnect between the music video and the lyrics, but I do think
Yeah.
they did a good job of making it all work together. You know, and with you
Yeah.
mentioned that, like, it still works with the feelings and like how you're gonna.
Yeah.
Like, I think they did a great job with it.
I did too. I was really surprised, especially where you pointed out that they are like a very hardcore, like deathcore
Yeah,
band
most of
with discussing like vocals and.
And don't get me wrong, they
lyrics.
have lots of nice melodies and stuff
Yeah.
like that. But again, this whole ballad
that's not
kind of
the-
feel that's, you know, dealing with.
Yeah, but that's not the highlight though.
No, exactly.
And that's where that's a great twist, but I think they kind of did that emotionally and really. It could also challenge one's like thoughts, feelings, and emotions of like how would you actually act and react if you were put in that position.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of us, we especially when we get close to our age, you do battle with those not only immortality but like, well, what would you do if somebody very very close and near dear to you would just die or vanish or go?
I think it's also very
Yeah.
different, like looking from the outside as opposed to being there, because it's
Yeah.
easy for us to go, well, this is how you should deal with something like that. But once you're in that position, all that rational thought's going to go out the window.
Yeah,
You're
yeah.
not going to be able to like rationalize that and be like, you know, this is how I should deal with stuff. And unfortunately, in this case, he goes to quite the extreme.
Yeah.
In that, which is obviously not a healthy way to deal with this. But
Yes. Yeah, I will definitely say if somebody is dealing with something like this, please get help.
yes, absolutely.
Yeah, that's anything else though. I mean, thoughts, feelings, emotions. If somebody's dealing with something like this, read the 5 stages of grief. It's definitely going to be a great help.
I really like the way the videos progress too. Like I said,
Yeah.
in the beginning you have, you know, rain where it's very somber and, you know, typical to the subject matter.
Yeah.
And then of course it turns to snow with the second part.
Mm-hmm.
And then of course as the anger kicks in, you know, we come back to the fire.
Yeah.
And so I really, and aside from just the fact that I like those transitions, just the way it was actually filmed, I thought
Yeah.
it was very beautiful. Like there's a shot in there in the beginning with like the lightning and stuff and Will
Mm.
and it's just composition, everything about that. I just thought it looked beautiful in the way it was put together. I really like this video.
Yeah, I didn't appreciate the first part until towards the end of the second part going into the third, where how it all ties in. Because I was just like, okay, I mean, it's very gothic, very goth-esque, with the operatic. I'm like, okay, I mean, nothing I haven't seen before, but also still very, very well put, very well done. Okay, yep, lightning, and then once ties in with the seasons, I'm like, okay. But then when I started putting two and two together, and I started recognizing certain things that make a pattern, I just went, okay, that makes sense, because we have a tragic event, because we're going to start with the whole, like, okay, there's always sunshine after the rain, there's always a bright blue sky after the storm. Cool, so we're going to see that. Okay, no, now we're seeing snow. Now we're seeing very almost like cool, obviously cool tones and dark, and we're getting diminished, and like the colors are getting muted. It's like, okay, there's death, and then all of a sudden, like,
which
okay.
works well, because like obviously when it turns to winter, all the trees die and stuff like that. You know, it turns into like a barren wasteland kind of look where everything's just
and where
cold too. You know,
and when you see him with I'm assuming the love of his life, very bright spring-esque summer, but then all of a sudden
his happiest moments where
and then when you start seeing like foreshadowing of her getting sick, it's where you see the leaves on the ground, so almost like where fall's coming. It's like,
all things are dying. I never thought about that. Actually,
and then where I was expecting, like, okay, so maybe where I thought it was going to go originally, I'm like, okay, when he finds her, it's going to show like the blooming, like the very first stages of spring where everything blooms. Like maybe that's going to be like that in the afterlife, and just know it got darker, and then it got heavier, and then all of a sudden the only thing that was very bright and vibrant of that part was just fire. And I think that's where it symbolizes, especially where the bandages where his wounds were, that was very vivid red, like a dark but vivid red. And then all of a sudden you just see like the fire just being the most vivid part of the entire video. So that was something I was not expecting at all. And how everything was still very dark and just, no, I'm going to salt the earth. You're going to witness your death of God, and you're going to hear the choirs of the devils, and I'm going there, and I'm taking you with me. Yeah. And then it's just like, okay, I was not expecting this. Yeah. Like it was intense.
I could even tell your facial expressions changed when we got into part 3. You were kind of like, okay, this is not where I thought this was going.
Yeah.
And I thought, okay, because in the beginning of the sad part, I was like, okay, Holly's a stone wall. She's not tearing up for this. She's good. But then I saw that shift at that moment. I was like, okay, we got her with something. So that was great after that.
Okay. Yeah, well, it's one of the things where I was, if I was expecting, if I could say like, okay, it's coming, I could go, all right, everything's fine.
Yeah.
And all of a sudden, I'm just like, oh, okay, no. This is something I wasn't expecting. So, and it like I said, it was taking like this dark, intense, like a very, it was very intense, and it kind of made me like want to go back to theater again.
Yeah.
Like,
it's definitely intense. Like even myself, if you watch his reactions, you know, I'm usually pretty animated and stuff, and while I was still bobbing my head a little bit and stuff, I was definitely a lot more reserved during this. I find myself usually like clenching my hands, or like kind of like just, I get wrapped up into it. Like it definitely grabs me, and it definitely, because of the subject matter, it's not something that's like, I'm gonna rock out to this, because it doesn't have that kind of feel to it. It's just kind of like, okay, I'm immersed in what's happening. And
it's to me, I thought it was a musical piece of art. A very, very modern, heavy-esque of a opera tale, kind of almost Shakespearean, more so like of the tragic plays of lost loves and stuff like that. So very, very gothic. Very gothic, very theatrical in that sort of way, and tying in. And it was, to me, the performance was great on that.
Now, do you think this would have hit you differently if the lyrics hadn't been on the screen? Because I purposely picked this one to put the lyrics there, because I figured you would appreciate those.
I do, especially being hard of hearing, just because I got scars on my eardrums. And now I'm getting older, so I always have subtitles on there now. I would definitely feel emotions of like where, because I would go by the guitars, actually, not by the drums or the synth. I would go by the guitars, where it's just like, because I found that was other than the vocalist, like the very main part of like where that's taking you, and where the where the build up is, and where, okay, this is where we're going to be somber, and then there's a build up, and then all of a sudden just,
because I know
there's a
personally,
final act.
I know personally, if I put this song on and I'm not watching the video, it has a very different feel to me.
Okay.
And that, like, I still like it. I mean, it still has a sadness to it, but it's not the same impact. Like, the video definitely changes it up and definitely grabs me more with the sadness and the grief, and again, seeing that anger at the end and the shift and everything. And that, but of the three, I don't know if you remember exactly the separations between the songs. Do you have a favorite out of them, or to you is it's just one song and you don't look at it that way?
No, I definitely view it as it's three separate songs, but they kind of tie together.
Yeah, they definitely run together as one.
Yeah, I guess more so. I guess more so like a play, almost like a operatic part where it does sometimes like they'll transaction into one scene and then go into another act and then into another, and how it all ties in. I do view it as separate songs, but it's not the same.
Yeah.
If you listen to them separately.
If I'm watching the videos, I want to listen to all of them together because it all plays out as one story. But personally, myself, if I'm just listening to this in the car or something like that, I tend to go to song 2 for some reason. That one seems to grab me the most. I think it's the most. It's the one I can just rock out to the most, you know, and I'm not thinking too much about the lyrics and what's taking place here. I'm just enjoying the song for what it is. Of course, I enjoy them all, but I think if I had to pick one, that's the one that grabs me the most and that I get the most into. But it definitely feels different just to listen to.
Yeah, I can see for you, song 2, absolutely. I would probably do more so into song 3.
3? Yeah.
Yeah.
That's kind of, I think 2, 3, and 1. That's kind of like the order of like, if I'm just going to listen to the songs of what I enjoy the most. And then, again, enjoy them all. I pretty much like all Lorna Shore stuff, so.
Yeah. I would like to, and I mean no disrespect to the vocals whatsoever, but because I really like the buildup of the guitars and how it just takes you on a journey very much of a story, I would like to listen to it just like the instrumentals.
Oh, just an instrumental version of it?
Yeah,
That'd be an
really
interesting
like
take
that.
on this because, I think it would feel quite a bit different there.
Yeah, that's what I would definitely like to do.
Is this something you think you would listen to on your own time, or is this something you just appreciate for what it is and like seeing the visuals and like the story unfold and that, or, you know, is Holly gonna go for a rip up the road and throw it on her stereo, or?
I think if there was an instrumental version, I would probably be more apt to listen to that. But if I have to have a choice of if I'm going to listen to it on my own, probably more so of Act 3.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Okay.
Definitely.
So overall, though, you enjoyed this?
Yeah, overall, you know what, it wasn't what I was expecting, and it actually wasn't that bad, and I did appreciate the twist. Because sometimes nowadays, like when the twist happens, it's kind of like, oh, come on.
Yeah, sometimes sometimes that breaks it. You're just like, oh, that was nonsense.
Yeah.
It didn't work, or...
Yeah, but that was a good twist, and I thought it was done really, really well, artistically, beautifully, and yeah, I thought it was not that bad overall, but you know what? Something I actually want to see a play of. I want to see this work out as a play. To be honest,
I think it would actually.
Yeah, I think that's where my mind's going.
Performance with this and the subject matter, obviously done differently than what the video portrays.
Yeah,
but I do think it would be, you know, good.
Yeah, I think that's where I think my mind is. Where I'm like, I'm not sure. That's where I want to see this as a play. Actually, that's what I want. That would be my challenge for them.
That would be cool.
Yeah.
So, thoughts on Lorna Shore as a whole right now? Now you've heard To the Hellfire and Pain Remains. Is this a band that you'd like to further explore? Do you really think it's not something you're so into, or still too hard to judge at this point?
I would explore more just because it is hard for me to judge right now. But I can say I definitely do appreciate their creativity, and I do believe that they are artists.
They're great musicians.
Yeah,
they're great at what they do, whether you enjoy it or not.
Yeah,
I think anyone that would sit here and say they are no good at what they do is just doesn't know what they're talking about.
Yeah, I can definitely appreciate them as artists right now. Whether it hits me or not is like I've not you showed me some where I'm just kind of like not my thing, but I can definitely still appreciate
So I
them.
never know with you because you'll surprise me. Some things I'm like, oh,
Yeah.
you might not like this, and you're like, no, I really like this. And then other times it's like, oh, I think you like this, and you're like, nah, 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 nah.
Yeah.
Which is great. In that we all have our own opinions on stuff. Music hits us differently.
Yeah.
Mood dependent. I can guarantee there's some stuff I'll listen to at one moment and be like, nah, I'm not really into this. And then in a different moment, in a different mood, I'm like, you know what? I actually do like this. So
Yeah, and don't feel bad because a lot of people are like that with me. They're like, "You're hard to read. I'm trying to get you music," but it's hard.
that's great. Though.
It's hard for me to like really like tie down with people, but so
Keeps me
far
on my toes.
so far I can definitely say I can really appreciate them as artists because for like the past, I'm gonna say 15 years, there hasn't been really anything of sustenance of what I personally think of like good musical art. It's starting to be almost like a lost cause where like everyone's kind of grabbing on like the niche and the kitschiness so they can get the attention. Now we're seeing like a little bit of a shift, and even if some of it doesn't really hit me, I can still appreciate it.
Yeah.
And I'm more curious of what Lorna Shore offers because it's still keeping me curious and it's still keeping me going, okay, what else is there?
Yeah.
So
I mean, this came out in 2022. We're now in 2025. I mean, they really should have some new material coming up before too long.
Yeah.
And then, so maybe we'll get to a point where we'll be able to react to some brand new stuff. And it'll be interesting to see what they do because I think this is going to be a hard album for them to top. I mean, it's pretty highly acclaimed amongst fans, so it'll be interesting to see what they do in the future.
Yeah.
So do you have anything else to add, or?
Oh, that's it.
All right, perfect. So you guys let us know if you'd like us to reaction, or if you'd like her to react to some more Lorna Shore. Of course, if you have other suggestions, always happy to hear about those. You know, we'll try to do what we can. Of course, you know, upon Holly's availability to do these reactions, of course, and that I'm sure she'll be back for more.
Yes,
And
of
that-
course, yeah.
So yes, and if you have a moment, then want to help support the channel, then please subscribe. It helps the channel grow. Impale that like button, and if you'd like to get our future updates, stab the notification bell down below for that. Also, don't forget about those socials down below. You can follow me on all the major platforms. The original link is down there. And if you'd like to check out my band Dagger, we also play symphonic deathcore stuff. There's some links down below for that as well. If you take the time to listen to something, I'd be happy to get some feedback from you. Once again, thank you so much for tuning in. Appreciate all of your support and hope everybody has an awesome day. Cheers, everybody. Stay sick.